and welcome back, adventurers. Sit down for a while and let me tell you a story of how the wolf god and his domain of Verbrek came to be. According to legend, the tale of Verbrek begins ages ago with the birth of the wolf god, an entity that sprang fully formed from the mist themselves. The wolf god's coming was no gentle dawn, for it tore itself from the womb of the mists, bloody, ravenous, and howling in the agony of life. Some Verbrekkers say that the wolf god arose out of necessity, a raging counterpoint to the cold enigma of the mists. The wolf god wandered the mists for untold ages, slaking his hunger on weaker creatures that crossed his path, but like all wolves, he longed for a pack. Remembering his own violent birth, he inhaled deeply, taking in the mist that surrounded him. Within him, the foul vapors mingled with his bone, flesh, blood, and bile. Racked by pain, he disgorged the brood of children formed in his own image. This became the first wolves. Eventually, the wolves encountered creatures they had never seen before. They seemed weak, for their fangs had fallen off and they were forced to carry them. Unlike all other prey, however, they had the power to change the face of the world as they saw fit. In this, they were not unlike the gods. When these humans began to destroy the forest with axe and flame, the wolves sent their strongest hunters to devour them. The beasts struck a vicious blow, but the humans routed them and pursued them into the forests, their hatred stoked. The wolves struck again with a newfound bloodlust, ravaging human cubs in their dens. Then the forest burned while the howls of carnage and sorrow echoed across the hills. The conflict degenerated into a bloody stalemate, as the strength of wolf and human waxed and waned. One night, when the moon was full, a small band of humans slipped unseen into the heart of the wolf's territory. Perplexed and amused at such suicidal foolishness, the god bade the humans to speak. The humans explained that they had seen the strength of the wolf god and his children, in contrast to the pitiful softness of humanity. Civilization, they claimed, had made humanity weak, and their 10 years masters of the world had lasted too long. The humans offered the wolf god a monstrous covenant. They and their families would call the god master and would secretly aid the wolves in their war against humanity. In return, the humans asked not only to be spared the wrath of the wolf god, but that he would bless them with their strength. He agreed to the deal that the humans offered, and then suddenly seized them in his jaws, tearing a bit of flesh from each man in turn. He then sank his fangs into his own flesh and allowed his steaming blood to wash over the wounds of each man. Through his blood, the traitors discovered the strength of wolves and the power to pass on a spoon through the bite. Their flesh became a cloak worn to fool their weaker human kin, for underneath they bore the shape of wolves. The wolf god commanded his bastard children to honor the moon, who had witnessed their birth, and to fear his sacred metal, silver, as it bore knowledge of the secret. He ordered them to lead his firstborn children into final battle, to drive the humans from wolf lands and return his children to their place as masters of the wilds. The werewolves did so, laying claim to a vast untouched forest at the borders of a human kingdom. Though they slaughtered countless men, women and children, the werewolves could not bring themselves to chase the humans from their lands utterly. Though they dared not admit such things to the wolf god, many of the werewolves grew to believe that they were favored creatures, greater even than the wolves themselves. Werewolves allowed a handful of humans to remain in their new homeland, but took pains to keep them in their proper place. The forest that the werewolves claimed they called Verbrek, which in the primitive language of wolves meant unwelcome place. Uttered by the tongue of human form, it became Verbrek. Although tales of the land to the south of Rishmallow first surfaced around 708 Barovian calendar, this realm was not known as Verbrek, but Arkandale, a land not unlike Verbrek where wolves that walk like men stalked along muddy riverbanks and through vast untouched forests. Meanwhile, Morntish anchorites first note a realm called Verbrek in the early 730s, observing that the wolves attacked any lumberjacks who took access to their forests. Both of these claims are equally true, as Arkandale was ruled by the father who didn't mind humans in his realm, while Verbrek is a prison for his son, the high priest of the wolf god. Much to the horror of those who live on the edges of Verbrek's forests, the werewolf population of the realm has expanded significantly since the Grand Conjunction. This is evidenced not only by the testimony of Verbrekkers themselves, but by the rising number of unusually brazen and cunning wolf attacks beyond Verbrek's borders. Over the past decade, neighboring realms have spread tales of marauding werewolf packs, ravaging their frontiers in search of victims for their unholy rites, or simply reveling in bloodshed for its own sake. This savagery leads to the hamlets scattered across Verbrek to be little more than wretched way stations, to be passed by on the way to safer realms. The hamlet of Flyfot huddles northwest of the Whale of Memory, along the Rarang River. The folks survive by raising vegetables and gathering the bounty of the forest. Flyfot contends with persistent wolf and werewolf attacks. The hamlet's defenders constructed the mightiest palisades I saw in the whole realm, complete with gates, traps, and primitive siege defenses. At the eastern edge of the Ghostflame Bottoms lies Alyssum, a hamlet that has prospered from trade with Karina along the Noisette River. The fur trade in particular is a strong component of the village life, and most locals are trappers by trade. This struck me as odd, since when Verbrek gather together, it is almost always in farming communities. Outwardly, Alyssum resembles any other Verbrek hamlet, that is plain, grubby, and rough around the edges. The villagers, however, were exceedingly warm and pleasant, which at once raised my suspicions. They seemed too keen to learn who I was, where I had come from, and where I was headed. They offered food and lodging out of the goodness of their hearts, encouraging me to spend the night. Having already dealt with the gruff, pushy, independent Verbrekkers for several weeks, the demeanor of Alyssum seemed out of place. Northwest of the Winterfang Crests, a day's journey from the Valakan border, stands Duckpeace Lodge. The lodge is a massive stone structure, its construction more befitting a fortress or prison than an estate. Oddly enough, every one of the structure's heavy steel doors and barred windows possesses sturdy locks both within and without. The masters of Duckpeace Lodge, Argent and Celia Whitmore, proved to be courteous hosts, but the strangest of their homes suggested that not all was as it appeared. The Whitmores claimed to be the recent Mordentish emigrants, having built the lodge as a sanctuary for lost travelers and outcasts seeking refuge in Verbrek, and especially those who have trouble containing the beasts within. The circle is the subject of much fearful legend among Verbrekkers. Though few natives spat that it is no more than a folktale, many assured me that it is the most holy of werewolf sacred sites. Here, werewolf primitives supposedly conduct blood sacrifices and other gruesome rites under the full moon. The wolf god himself is whispered to appear to his fearsome followers on rare holidays, towering over the stones that ring the circle. The circle is a nightmarish place. Each dolmen is carved with crude glyphs and spattered with blood of countless sacrifices. Humanoid bones are scattered everywhere, so thick in some places that it is impossible to see the trampled earth beneath. Among the stones, over 200 werewolves in a hybrid form perform their rites. Clad in bone trinkets and savage war paint, they chant in a growling mishmash of Mordentish and wolf speak. Some beat relentlessly on hollow logs, filling the glade with a frantic heartbeat. Others writhe on the ground as though possessed or dance in unsettling patterns. Fresh blood covers their mouths, and many bear hideous scars. In contrast to its skin, the high priest stands like a stony judge, surveying the bloody revelry with an unfeeling gaze. It is a terrifying creature with dense, silver hair, dressed in elaborate ceremonial garb that marks it as an emissary of the wolf god. Thank you so much for your time, patient listeners. Verbrek might be the most hostile domain we ever visited together, and yet I can't see a reason for anyone to pass through this wretched domain. But if you really want to prove yourself, be careful while crossing the mists.